What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Ian Ewing. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the Packers beating the Los Angeles Rams. Oh, wait a minute. That was the Bears losing to the Los Angeles Rams. What a fun game last night. I'm recording this quite early in the morning, and I'm still chippy about it. I know Bears fans, you guys should gloat a little bit. I know they've seen some Packer fans who've gotten way too happy about this particular loss, but if we can't beat the Bears ourselves, then hopefully it's Devontae that gets to do it. And sure enough, Devontae was an integral part of that. What a fun game. Caleb Williams, clearly had some sort of handshake deal with the football gods this year or whatever. That throw he made at the end of the game was nutso. To extend it and put it into overtime, I will say, more of an indictment on the defensive back from the Rams, which has been a problem for them all year. So that means it's Broncos, Patriots, and Rams, Seahawks. I definitely saw this happening. I think even if the Packers were in the playoffs, I do think it was the best two teams in the NFC this year were the Seahawks and the Rams. The Seahawks have an unbelievable defense, one of my favorite units in the NFL, and the Rams can score on anyone. But last night they looked like poopy, so I'm not entirely sure what was in the water there. Maybe it was the weather. Whatever it was, I'm excited for the games next weekend. Obviously, a huge bummer to the Broncos losing Bo Nix. That was quite disappointing. My wife and I were at a concert this weekend, and the dude sitting next to me was like, "Oh yeah, did you see Bo Nix broke his collarbone?" And then turns out it was actually his ankle or whatever. But that's like Packers level luck, right? You get to the NFC Championship game, and then your quarterback goes down. So we'll see if Jared Stidham can stand up to the Patriots and do something this weekend. But anyway, fun slate of games. But you guys aren't here to talk NFL, even though we'll probably do a little bit of that the next few weeks. On today's episode, we're going to talk through the big news that came for Packers fans this weekend. Matt LaFleur has agreed to an extension with the Packers, as well as Russ Ball and Brian Gutekunst. Before we get into that, though, I do want to talk through some possible defensive coordinators that the Packers might be looking at, because we got news on Friday that Jeff Hafley is the front runner for the Dolphins head coaching job, which, again, anyone who's been kind of paying attention so far this year would probably already know this, but John Eric Sullivan, the Packers, basically Goody's right-hand guy, got the GM job for the Dolphins. Therefore, he saw all year just how good Jeff Hafley was with this team, and it appears he's going to get a head coaching job, whether it be with the Dolphins or a different team. Evidently, and no surprise to those of you that watched the press conferences, no surprise, but Hafley's blown away everyone in basically every interview that he's had so far. So I will say, no surprise there. I know I expressed a little bit of pushback on Hafley for the Bears game. The Packers defense gave up 25 points in the fourth quarter of that playoff game, and I don't think he is the guy to blame for it, obviously. You hold that Bears team to 6 points through three quarters. It took a pretty historical collapse for that game to go the way it did. I thought the offense obviously did him no favors. You can't keep going 3 and out. Can't keep giving it back to your defense the entire game with that Bears team, which, again, I think they had some sort of handshake with the football gods. But I will say this. Hafley did a much better job in 2024 than he did this season. I don't want to downplay what he did this year, right? And I may have mentioned it. I know others have mentioned it. I don't want to take full credit on this, but I do think there's a possibility that the Packers can actually upgrade at defensive coordinator in this coaching cycle. There's a lot of really good candidates out there. We're going to talk through them. I don't want to go into a ton of detail because I don't want to pretend like I know a lot about these guys, but I'll talk through some candidates, some names to listen for. And, I'm not the most informed podcaster, but I do know that it's probably going to be one of these guys. So first of all, what is Matt LaFleur looking for in a defensive coordinator? To answer that question, we can look at what he did with Hafley. And one thing that he said over and over again about Hafley was that he was aggressive. He had an attacking style defense, right? And all the guys we're about to go over are the same way. And if you look at the juxtaposition between Joe Barry when he was here and Hafley, Joe Barry was content with giving you 10 yards every play and just praying that you messed up before the end zone. And you guys know, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I loathe that style of defense. And at times this year, it kind of went that way for the Packers. But the other thing that LaFleur liked about Hafley was that he was a head coach before. And if you think about it, it makes sense. You want to bring someone in who can carry that side of the ball because, Matt's going to have the offense. He's got the whole team to worry about. He doesn't have the bandwidth to spend a ton of time in the defensive meeting rooms. Now, I think one of the reasons he picked Joe Barry was because he thought that he could control Joe Barry. But one thing that I think the Joe Barry experiment taught us is that you can't really, and again, I think you learned some good lessons from the Joe Barry experiment, not to take chances on assistant coaches. That's what I would say. Joe Barry was a coordinator in the 2010s. I believe he was the coordinator the year the Lions went 0-16. I'm pretty sure that's true. But he chose Joe Barry because Joe Barry worked under Brandon Staley, whose defense was number 1 in the NFL in 2020. He wanted Staley's scheme, essentially. But what I thought was interesting, and I don't know why this wasn't talked about much at the time, but Joe Barry never ran that scheme when he was a coordinator. He ran more of like a Tampa 2 cover 2 scheme. It wasn't really what he had coordinated when he was a coordinator. So I think that whoever he picks is going to have head coaching experience or someone who's coordinated at a high level before. So let's talk about the candidates. Number 1, I want to go over Raheem Morris. I think Raheem Morris is the guy they're going to pick. I'll just say that up in the front end. Morris got fired from the Falcons. He was the head coach for the Falcons the last 2 seasons, I believe. And this season, it was interesting that they fired him because he did have a 4-game win streak at the end of the season. He beat the Rams, which I thought was interesting. If you listen to the players, they all that played for Raheem Morris, they all would go to war for him. He was the coordinator in 2021 when the Rams won the Super Bowl. Now, you did have Aaron Donald that year. You had Jalen Ramsey, but that defense was really good that season. And he did eventually become a head coach. He coordinated for the Rams for 3 seasons. The biggest thing here is Matt and Raheem are really good friends. They came up in Atlanta under Dan Quinn. And Raheem Morris, he did have the 3rd overall defense in 2021, at least in DVOA, the year they won the Super Bowl. But he's never really coordinated a top defense other than that one. So that makes me a little nervous. But he's also never had Micah Parsons. He's never had Edgerrin Cooper, Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, all the guys we could keep naming, right? Like I said, I think Raheem Morris is the front runner at this point. It's someone Matt trusts. He's had success in the league. He's definitely the kind of leader that you want on defense. He plays a very, aggressive attacking style defense. He does run a base 3-4, which I don't think matters too much because, again, the league is playing nickel almost 100% of the time these days. And he loves to blitz, so I do think that's another benefit. The main selling point for him, though, is if you look what him and Jeff Ulbrich did in Atlanta this year, they took a really young defense. I mean, they had like 7 rookies playing significant snaps on that defense, and they were playing at a really, really high level at the end of the season. They were getting awesome player from Billy Bowman. They got awesome play from a host of guys. Jalen Walker. There's a bunch of guys. I don't want to go through all of them, but the head coaching experience is going to be a big factor here. He was a coordinator for 3 seasons successfully. He's definitely the most likely pick. The number 2 one I want to talk about is Brian Flores. Yes, the Vikings, Brian Flores. This is the best possible outcome. If I were to say, you said, Ian, who do you want them to pick? This would be my guy. Is there a realistic chance for this? Yes, albeit a small chance. Brian Flores is currently getting head coaching interviews, and he's thought to be the front runner for Vegas right now for the Raiders. He should be a head coach. I don't really know the intricate details of the scandal, but he has a lawsuit right now essentially accusing the NFL basically in a conspiracy not to hire him as a head coach. I don't know the details of that. That's why I'm not going to speak on it too much, but there is this feeling across the league that he's not a head coach right now because of what happened in Miami. He's definitely a fiery guy. He definitely scarred Tua, which is kind of interesting. You talk about wanting a guy who can bring some fire. That's Brian Flores. He's a fantastic coach, and I want nothing more than him to get the hell out of Minnesota and never play the Packers again. And I do think that's going to happen, whether he gets a coordinator job with a defense he probably would do better with, or likely a head coaching position. The last few years, what he's done cannot be understated. I would think Vikings fans would disagree with this, but I don't think the talent on that defense is near up to what they've gotten out of them production-wise. Name a star on the defense for the Vikings. I'll wait. They don't really have good corners. They've made a star out of some guys like Andrew Van Ginkel. Jonathan Grenard is a great player, but is he Micah Parsons? No. They had God, I can't remember his name now. Eric Wilson. The Packers had him last year. Eric Wilson, he's a linebacker, playing like a Pro Bowl level this year. Their cornerbacks, Byron Murphy, he never played any sort of good cornerback play before the Vikings. My point is Brian Flores gets a ton out of his guys, and that's all you can ask for, to be honest. If he doesn't get a head coaching job, he's still a free agent defensive coordinator. Now, will the Packers be the team that outbids everybody else? I would say maybe not. But if there's a team out there that understands the value of Brian Flores, it's probably the Packers, right? It's the team that's played them, the last 3 seasons, 2 times a year. Flores has made it really, really tough on Matt and this offense in general, really, since he's been over there. The biggest appeal for Flores, though, why would Flores pick the Packers? Well, by far, this is the best defense out there that's looking for a coordinator. I don't think it's close, to be honest. Let's not forget about the guy, what's his name again? Micah Parsons. Yeah, the opportunity to coach Micah Parsons is probably one that a lot of guys would be interested in. So if this is given a fair shake and he does not become a head coach, I do think that the most appealing job out there, provided the Packers will pay up for him, is the Packers defensive coordinator job. I think ultimately he wants to be a head coach again, right? So what's the fastest way to be a head coach again? You pilot an elite defense on a title contender, right? This would be my dream scenario. And I cannot stress enough how good this defense would be if they picked him. That's probably why they won't. I don't want to be a cynic here, but that would be a nasty defense, and I'm here for it. Option number 3, Jim Leonhard. Yes, the former Badgers defensive coordinator and interim head coach, Jim Leonhard. Yes. Some of you might not know this, so I'm going to say this in the event you don't know. But the year that the Packers hired Joe Barry to be their defensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard was offered the position first. Okay? Jim Leonhard turned it down because he thought that he was the next in line in Madison. I don't remember. Paul Christ? Yeah, Paul Christ. Is that right? I don't follow Badger football too well. Whoever the hell it was before Fickle. Now, they obviously picked Luke Fickle. They went outside of their organization for that. You got to wonder if he regrets that now. I would assume he does. But you also have to wonder from the Packers standpoint, how different would 2021 through 2023 look if they had Jim Leonhard at the helm versus Joe Barry? Obviously, he had immense success at Wisconsin, and it was likely at the time, for what we knew, that he was going to be the head coach of the Badgers because of that. Now, again, it went to Luke Fickle, but he's back in the NFL coaching right now for Denver. And you all know how effing good the Denver defense has been. Now, he's not a coordinator in Denver, but he's working under Vance Joseph. This is going to be floated around. I do think if Vance Joseph gets a head coaching job, which is possible, I think Jim Leonhard might just become the defensive coordinator there. But if he becomes available, if Vance Joseph does not get a job, you got to think that the Packers are going to be very interested in his services. I'll just say that. When he was with Wisconsin, I cannot stress enough how hard it was to do what he did. And especially now, you guys are getting a lot more transparency on what's happening in college football. To do what he did with that defense, they were a top 5 defense in the entire country when he was the coach there. Barely any elite recruits, a bunch of slow white dudes on the defensive line, right? Bunch of slow white linebackers, not to bring race into it, of course, just for a little chuckle. But again, not a lot of talented guys on defense, right? And he was able to get a ton out of that team every year he was there. So I think he's got sky-high potential as a coach. I think he's going to be a head coach someday. He'd be a really good candidate, in my opinion. You just got to wonder if maybe the Packers don't want to go there because he turned him down once. I don't know. They did not interview him, I don't think, when they hired Jeff Hafley. But, we'll see. Option number 4, Sean McDermott. So hot off the presses, Sean McDermott was fired by the Bills. And after the Bills were eliminated Saturday, there was some thought that they might fire him. I was a little surprised they did. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. I was kind of in the middle on it. I'm not super shocked, right? This was the best chance the Bills had to win a Super Bowl since they've had Josh Allen, right? The NFL at this point, the AFC was wide ass open, right? Now, I think Josh Allen gave that game away more than I did Sean McDermott giving it away, but I digress. McDermott's probably going to get a head coaching job. I'd be surprised if he didn't. However, if he does not, he's going to be the most sought-after DC that out there, right? He, just like Brian Flores, would probably love a chance to coach Micah Parsons in this defense. When Micah Parsons was a defensive coordinator, my God, he was good. He piloted that Carolina defense to one of the best in the league almost the entire time he was there. He got them to the Super Bowl in 2015. Nobody talks about, Cam Newton got all the headlines that year, but that Panthers defense was nasty that season. Now, Peyton Manning did pretty well against them in the Super Bowl, but he's a great coordinator. I think he's going to be a phenomenal defensive coordinator if he doesn't get a head coaching job. And I do think there's a good chance he picks the Packers in that scenario. Option number 5 is Zach Orr. Zach Orr is an interesting candidate. He was John Harbaugh's DC the last 2 seasons he was there after Mike Macdonald left for the Seahawks, right? Now, it was never confirmed, I don't think, but it was leaked through the ether that when the Packers did hire Hafley, their first choice was actually Zach Orr. So that means the 2 times in a row under LaFleur, they did not get their first 2 choices, which is kind of funny. Again, we don't know if that's true or not, but we do know he interviewed for the job. I remember back at that point, Zach Orr was my guy. He was the guy that I wanted them to get. He is the ultimate motivator. He's a tough MFer type of coach, right? Super, super aggressive. A lot of tight man coverage. I really, really liked Zach Orr. That dude could do a speech, man. You want to talk about a guy who could change the entire temperament of that defense, that's your guy. But since he took over for Baltimore, the defense hasn't been that good. They just haven't. Particularly this season, right? They were in the 20s in both total defense scoring and DVOA. So that's a little concerning, right? But he was there under Mike Macdonald, who's obviously an insanely good coach. You've all seen that with what he's done with Seattle and their defense. Whew. So I do wonder if Orr's lack of success is just due to the fact that Baltimore really hasn't had a good pass rusher. And in his scheme, you need it. You need to get pressure with 4 with that scheme. Now, they did really well against the run this year, and you saw that against the Packers. I think they got Josh Jacobs had 6 yards rushing or something. Just brutal. So I do think Zach Orr is an interesting candidate. And if they did offer him the job last time, he stayed with Baltimore. You wonder if maybe they give him a shot this time. Now, maybe he just goes over to Harbaugh's team and the Giants, right? That's very likely. But there's also Anthony Weaver, who also was under McDonald that same time period. He's been the Dolphins defensive coordinator. There's also maybe a possibility there. That same report that thought it was Zach Orr said it also could have been Anthony Weaver. So I'm not really sure. I guess we'll see, right? A couple honorable mentions to watch. They could go internally with either Derek Ansley or DeMarcus Covington. I don't think they should, nor will they. I don't know. I think you can take a chance on guys when they don't have experience or success at other places. I just would not. These 2 have both been defensive coordinators before. They just haven't been very good ones. And maybe Matt wants continuity and less changeover. That's certainly possible. Another guy to look for, Christian Parker. He worked under Fangio in Philly the last few seasons. He's currently the DB coach over there, the passing game coordinator as well. The last time the Packers did interviews when they hired Hafley, he was also the quality control coach. The last time they did interviews, he was also part of that. He was also the quality control coach in 2019 through 2020. So if they do go with the guy that has little to no DC experience, it's probably going to be Parker. I think he's an interesting hire. That Eagles defensive back room is just nasty. I mean, you look what they did with Makuba this year, with DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell last year. I think he's a really up-and-coming guy. He's going to be a defensive coordinator at some point, and maybe the Packers take a chance on him. The only other guy is Aiden Dirty. He's the DC for Seattle right now. He's actually British, Aiden Dirty. If you guys watched the Hard Knocks season with, I think it was the Cowboys, he was on that season. Really interesting guy. He's not calling plays in Seattle right now. So technically, Mike Macdonald could let him do a lateral move to become a DC who calls plays. Because again, Mike Macdonald calls the defense in Seattle. He's already getting interviews. I think Dallas has already interviewed him. I think there's going to be others as well. He's an interesting name for sure. But again, Macdonald has to sign off on wherever he goes. And I don't know if Macdonald would sign off on him going to the Packers, considering they're going to be competing next year for the title, most likely. But we'll see. We'll see. My ultimate prediction is they're going to go with Raheem Morris. And I would be not ecstatic over that, but I would be happy with that. I do think there's a chance for them to be him to be an upgrade. Let's talk about the LaFleur extension, which is why you guys are all listening to this episode. This is a clearly hotly contested and triggering conversation for a lot of Packer fans. I'm quite surprised at that. So I'm going to go through why he was not fired, but also why they were probably right to retain him. And I want to start off by saying this, and if you guys listened to the post-game episode, you guys heard me. I texted a lot of people privately saying I think it might be time to move on from Matt. And the main reason being a loss like that, even if everything goes right for them, is going to be really hard to overcome without making, wholesale changes. I still believe this to some degree, and I do think there's something missing on this team. I don't know exactly what it is. And I'll tell you what, if I don't know what it is, you guys don't know what it is, none of us fans have a clue what that is. The most capable people of fixing this team are the ones who are in the building, not a bunch of fans on Twitter. Not a bunch of people who, like myself, played 1 year of football, and just because we played football before, we think we know how it works, and And I've already heard people talking about this, like, we just accept mediocrity in Green Bay. This is title town, not division town, and blah. Like, the amount of diarrhea that I've seen coming out of people's fingers on Twitter and just on YouTube and Instagram, right? The idea, I just want to talk about this really quick. And I respect the fact that, the Packers are title town. We've had, 13 titles? Other teams haven't even come close to that, right? This idea that this is like, this is title town. The only thing acceptable is a Super Bowl, and anything less than the Super Bowl is a failure and all this stuff. I'm like, no shit. No shit. Every team, guys, is going for a Super Bowl every season. This idea that the Packers are unique, that we're the team that our standard is higher than a division title, and our standard is the Super Bowl. Every effing team in the league has the same goal. It's to win the Super Bowl. Now, some teams might not be, ready to compete for one right away. That's fine, right? The Jets, that's not their goal in 2026, right? They're not trying to win a Super Bowl. They're trying to decide if their organization is, first of all, is it even going in the right direction, right? But this idea that the Packers are just like, we're entitled to titles and nobody else is because we've had more. Dude, every team is trying to win a title. By that logic, every team, 31 teams are not going to win the Super Bowl, right? By the logic of, Matt LaFleur's never won a Super Bowl, neither have 31 other coaches every year. If that's your standard for keeping a coach, you're just dumb, or you're just not getting it. You don't understand context. I want the Packers to win a Super Bowl more than anybody. It's probably dramatic, but I want them to win a Super Bowl so bad. I can't think of anything more exciting in my life outside of obvious real events, sports-wise, nothing more exciting than when the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010. The feeling, I still hold on to that feeling. I'm sure you guys do too, so I get it. But this idea that, the bar is a Super Bowl for Green Bay. Every team has the bar of the Super Bowl for, it's not just the Packers. We're not entitled to it more than other people just because we won more titles. We're just not. So every year, success looks differently every season. Every season that does not have a Super Bowl is a failure, yes. But does that mean we fire all the coaches until we find one? That's not the way it works. You guys are not living in reality. This is not Madden. This isn't like, oh, my life is going shitty, so I'm just going to complain about the Packers. I'm going to feel better. And again, I'm not trying to call anybody out. I'm not trying to be a dick here, but just some of the vitriol I've seen in comments, right? And I'm trying to offer a different perspective here. So I want to start off by saying, let's get into it. Sorry, I'm just rambling now. I want to start off by saying I think one of the main reasons why I was against firing LaFleur or not moving on from him or whatever is because there just aren't any better options out there. And I'm not going to go through each one, right? But you can't risk a first-time head coach unless they're like a full-blown obvious choice, like a Ben Johnson last year. There's no Ben Johnson in this coaching cycle. John Harbaugh, Sean McDermott, they're not the guys. The main reason Sean McDermott just got fired is because he's never made it past the AFC Championship game, and they've melted down. Same thing that everybody's pissed about the Packers for. John Harbaugh, right? He won a Super Bowl. Yeah, but the last couple seasons, they have given up leads in like every one of the games that they've been in. Those aren't your guys. Trust me. Now, I don't see a Ben Johnson in this cycle, and that's my main reason for saying no to this. And it wouldn't matter anyway because we did find out that LaFleur's job was never in question. So we can complain all we want, right? But it was never going to happen. Since Jordan Love has become the starter, Matt is only slightly above 500, and I get that. But I think context matters, and I want to go back, and I want you to use your brains for a minute, right? Let's go back to 2022, okay? The Packers tried to run it back one more time with Aaron, and in my opinion, that was the wrong calculation. They brought back a bunch of guys that they shouldn't have. They pushed Cap down the road further. We all remember that team, the The team went 8-9 that year. The leading receiver was Alan Lazard, by the way, who's basically unemployed at this point. No competent tight ends. Their O-line was fine. Their defense was average, right? And it took a 4-game win streak to get them near the playoffs. So Matt does not get enough credit, by the way, for digging them out of the grave in 2022. At one point, they were 4-8. They were basically on life support. He kept that team together and rallied them to the end, right? And then after that season, guys, they got rid of half their roster. And this is not an exaggeration, right? And one of the guys they got rid of was, your Hall of Fame quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. So LaFleur revived Rodgers' career. And let's get this logic chokehold for you guys, or pretzel. All the LaFleur haters say, well, he's only ever had success when Aaron Rodgers was here. Okay, so that means you think Aaron carried that team. Fair enough. Okay. By that logic, the fact that LaFleur took that team after losing Rodgers, a brand new quarterback, Jordan Love, to a divisional playoff near win, that should be a mark in the why we keep LaFleur column. So again, if you blame Rodgers for all the success LaFleur's had, well, how do you blame the fact that LaFleur's gotten this team? That means you think Aaron Rodgers is amazing, great, elite. He is, by the way. So the fact that LaFleur gets them all the way to the divisional round, 1 year after Aaron Rodgers leaves, you're not going to give him any credit for that? I think you're just a hypocrite at that point. And let's go into 2023 is a year of brand new starters, right? You come into that season, anyone with an objective brain would have said the only goal in 2023 was to see if Jordan Love is the franchise quarterback. And halfway through that season, we didn't know, right? We didn't. You got a guy in Jordan Love who looked like a bust 2 years ago, right? A lot of things were looking bleak. I think they were 3-6 that season, and LaFleur does not get enough credit for this, but he rallied that team who was 3-6 all the way to the divisional round of the playoffs. That team could have just given up. Full of young guys. They were, we're not supposed to win we're not supposed to win this year anyway, whatever. And if LaFleur was who a lot of you think he is, they would have given up that season. But instead, they beat the eventual Super Bowl champions in the Chiefs. They beat the Lions handily on Thanksgiving. They bitch-slapped the Cowboys in the playoffs. They get all the way to the 49ers game and nearly win. Matt coached his ass off in that game, by the way. And Jordan, being the young quarterback he was, he threw the game away, threw some picks. But even still, they could have won it if Anders Carlson would have just made his damn kicks. So going into 2024, right, a year ago, you were hoping, okay, well, let's just assume that it didn't go that way, right? Let's say they didn't win they didn't win that game. They didn't make that run, right? In 2024, at that point, you're just hoping, well, okay, Jordan's the guy now. Cool. Let's see if we can win some games this year, right? So I truly believe this. If the Packers didn't make the playoffs in 2023 and they fell on the timeline that we thought they would be in, which was maybe contending in 2024, but 2025 and 6 would be really good. If they didn't do well in 2023, I don't think a lot of people would even be mad right now. So they're ahead of schedule, right? They're the third year in the row, being the youngest team in the NFL, making the playoffs every year, and we don't give it back any credit for that. Then we fast forward to 2024, right? Brand new scheme on defense. Jordan hurts his knee the first week of the season. The rest of the season, it bothers him, right? He gets other injuries, the groin, the shoulder, whatever the hell else it was, right? I can't even remember at this point. They go 11-6, right? Your quarterback misses effectively 4 games. He's in and out of 2 of them, right? And, you get eliminated by the eventual Super Bowl champions. And by the way, they gave him probably the best fight of anybody that year. Then we get to this season. Because of where they finished in 2023, we saw seeds of winning in 2024. They just couldn't beat good teams. The Packers go out and acquire Micah Parsons. And then every pundit in the world puts Green Bay as a Super Bowl contender, right? They win 2 games right away. Then they get inconsistent, and they finally start to figure it out when it mattered most, right? They're 9-3. They look like the best team in the league halfway through the Broncos game. And then you lose your best player, and then you lose a bunch of other players, and then shit just happened. It just did. LaFleur had this team about a year ahead of schedule, I would say. By Packer fans' own admission, I would say. They're a year ahead of schedule. And then a series of catastrophic injuries happen, and you meet a team touched by God in the Bears, who did, by the way, some crazy shit last night in the game, right? That throw by Caleb Williams was just ridiculous. Unbelievable. But even the fact that he got caught was unbelievable. Anyway, I'm not saying Matt LaFleur is beyond blame. We'll talk about it in a second, but if you want to know why policy brought him back, everything I just went over, that's why. Any other franchise that loses a Hall of Fame quarterback along with half their vet starters, it can take years to recover from that. Years. Think about all the teams in the NFL right now. How many of them could make the playoffs 3 years in a row after losing Aaron frickin' Rodgers, who just won 2 MVPs in 2020 and 2021? The fact that he got this team, LaFleur, where they are now, it's not talked about enough. And the expectations are what they are because of what Matt has done with this team. The only reason everyone's pissed they didn't win the Super Bowl and that they were only Micah Parsons away, it's because Matt got them to that point. Nobody's talking about this. Everybody wants someone to blame. I get it. But sometimes you just get the shit under the stick. Only one team can win every year. 2 teams make it. Anyway, I don't mean to get so revved up about it. I just feel like we're just, the amount of vitriol I've seen death threats on Twitter over this. Come on. Be better than that. Let's address the mental mistakes on the team, right? The way this team folds in on itself sometimes, the way they get, out physical at times. Again, the mental mistakes, all the stuff you guys hear people put on LaFleur, right? Or at LaFleur's feet. This is part and partial to the fact that they're a team full of young kids under 25 years old that are starting and playing meaningful snaps for your football team. The Packers have been the youngest team in the NFL for 3 years in a row, by far, by the way, not even close. This year, last year, even they were supposed to win a Super Bowl. I got some news for you guys. The youngest team in the league has won a Super Bowl one time in the history of the NFL, and it was the 2014 Patriots with Tom Brady at quarterback. That's the list. The youngest team in the NFL has never even made the Super Bowl other than that year. So if the Packers made the Super Bowl in next year, by the way, they're going to be the youngest team again next year, probably. It is unprecedented for the Packers to make a Super Bowl with this team being so young. Now, you can say, yeah, they may be young, but they played a lot of football together. And yeah, that's true. But they're still a bunch of super young kids. Some of these guys, yeah, they've been in the league for 4 years. I get it. But another big chunk of the team is played for 2 years, and maybe even 1. And let me use a couple more examples to make my case. Let's look at the 2020 team under LaFleur. This was the best team the Packers have had since the Super Bowl year. I would argue this year they were better before all the injuries. Let's look at all the starters. Rodgers was the quarterback, Hall of Famer. Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, year 4 for both. Devontae Adams, year 6 or 7, I can't remember which one, Hall of Famer. Robert Tonyan, you could argue that one, right? Young guy. David Bakhtiari and Brian Bulaga, veteran all-pro tackles, right? Elton Jenkins and John Runyon Jr., good young guards, right? And then Corey Linsley, veteran all-pro. So even your offensive line, you got 3 all-pros, veteran players. Let's go to the defensive line. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith. These are second contract guys. These are year 5+ guys. You guys remember how good they were when they signed them. Defensive tackle, Kenny Clark, year 6, Pro Bowler. Dean Lowry, year 3 or 4. Christian Kirksey at linebacker, year 5. Chandon Sullivan and Kevin King. Kevin King was year 4. Jair Alexander, all-pro. At safety, Darnell Savage, he was a young guy, right? Year 2. Actually, he was a rookie that season. Year 2. And then Adrian Amos, year 5. Veteran players at every level of this team, amongst, some young guys, some up-and-comers. But by the way, take note of how many of these guys were on the team in 2023. I mean, this was a full reset of this roster. So why didn't this 2020 team have mental mistakes? Why did they not give up leads? Why were they able to slap around the Rams in 2021 and nearly beat the Buccaneers and beat some really good teams? Why were they so damn consistent? Because they were talented and experienced. None of their premier starters, at least the ones they relied upon, were in year 3 or younger. They just weren't. How many on this team can you actually say that? Hint, not enough. And there just aren't experienced veterans to offset some of the youth like there were in those 20 and 21 teams, right? And if you talk to NFL people, you guys have probably heard this over and over again, people who scout, they all say players don't really take their final form until year 3 and beyond. Okay? Look how many starters on the Packers that we rely upon who are in year 3 or less. Some of them are barely in year 3. So I called into a Madison radio station and I brought up this point. Not that you guys care about me, but I'm just going to say it. I was brushed off and they rolled their eyes at it. Not an excuse. Oh, not an excuse. I'm sorry. The disingenuousness about this team and the way LaFleur is blamed, it's just driving me insane. And conversely, I'm not blaming Goody for this. I do think he's constructed a hell of a team. I think this is the right way to build it. But when you have a team full of children, albeit extremely talented children, right, you're going to have ups and downs, especially when you lose guys like Micah Parsons, Tucker Kraft, guys that are your leaders on this team. And that said, I do think this team needs more of an edge. Some of these guys aren't taking the step we thought they would take, and we'll get into that in another episode. But, you know, to close with this Bears game, you know, we talked about it. It was really, really bad. I'm not saying it's not. But laying it all at LaFleur's feet just because of, you know, whatever lame coaching cliche you heard in football in high school, it's just not compelling enough for me. It's most certainly not because Matt has a nice haircut. I want to point to the Justice Mosqueda article. I brought this up in the last episode. Acme Packing Company, I referenced it in that episode. The Packers' assistant coaches on this team. So again, the position coaches are the ones who, they're the ones who coach the young guys the most. They're the guys with the players, right? It's the most inexperienced in the entire NFL, Packers assistant coaches. And again, if you ask NFL players who's in charge of development and who's in charge of keeping your composure at the coaching level in big games, right? It's the position coaches. They're the ones who rotate guys. The players spend a lot more time with these guys than they do Matt, Jeff, or Rich Bisaccia. And if you read that article, the Packers don't have close to the amount of experience that other teams do in those assistant coaches. Their literal wide receiver coach was a defensive line coach before last season. Crazy. Or offensive line, sorry. So I don't want to spoil the article. You guys should read it. But it clearly points out, makes the point that they're the most inexperienced group of assistant coaches in the league. So how can you be a draft and develop team with a group of assistants who are also inexperienced? So if you want to point fingers somewhere, that's the first place I would point them. And I think that they've started a reverse course on this. You saw it with DeMarcus Covington. They got rid of Rebrovich or whatever his name was last year at the defensive line because he didn't give him results. I do think there's going to be changes this year. I think that they're going to fire Luke Buckus in the offensive line. I believe that. I wonder if we see Rich Bisaccia retire. Either way, I rambled too much in this episode. I hope you guys got something away from it. Again, my point is not to say that there's not legitimate reasons to be pissed about Matt. Him getting extended, I'm not excited about it. I'm not stoked. I'm not relieved. But at the same time, the way people are talking about it, it's like the Packers are just purposely choosing to lose, which is ludicrous. So, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. If we can be nice to each other, let me know your thoughts. I'll be back with another episode this weekend. I appreciate you guys listening. In the meantime, go Pack, go.